Okay, let's get off of that soapbox right away. Hey, what's up, guys? It's Devin Harrington, the average Gen Xer, and welcome back to my channel, where today we are going to look into the recent drama in the US surrounding the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, also known as food stamps, also known as the EBT card, or Electronic Benefits Transfer Card. So, if you're unfamiliar, the US federal government recently shut down for 40 days, and during that time, the 42 million Americans who receive government assistance in the form of food stamps did not receive their November allotment, or did not receive all of it. And there has been a shitstorm going on TikTok primarily, but kind of all over the internet, with people getting very upset about not having their food stamps. And that has also generated a lot of hate for people who Americans seem to think are taking advantage of the system. Now, humans are humans. We are greedy. We push the envelope. We want to see what we can get away with. And so, in my humble opinion, it's human nature that if you have a program like SNAP, sure, there's going to be some people that take advantage of that. And we will get into that a little bit later. But overall, the vast majority of people on the SNAP benefits program are working, or disabled, or veterans, or single moms who need help, and they genuinely need those benefits. The amount of people that are actually taking advantage is very, very small. And that is a stereotype that needs to be left in the 20th century from whence it came, because it was basically the first Ronald Reagan presidential campaign where we started hearing the term welfare queen. And I did not even know this, but he actually based it on a real person. So let's just find some facts about the SNAP program. The government has reopened and people will start getting some of their benefits. But there's been a whole lot of just crappy, just ick online about the SNAP benefits. And so I just wanted to maybe share some facts about it that might change people's minds. Okay, let's get on with it. But first, this is the part of the video where I beg and plead with all animal lovers out there to please consider fostering or volunteering on site for your local animal shelter. It's easier than you think. It doesn't take as much time as you think. It's not as expensive as you think. And you get the warm, fuzzy feeling of knowing that you helped save the world for those little souls. So I still have my foster goalie. She's actually asleep on the floor over there. But I wanted to say thank you to all the viewers who caught in my video last week that I made my dog something with onions in it, and were kind enough to remind me that onions are toxic to dogs. I had totally forgotten about that. So I actually went and looked up this handy dandy chart, which I will leave up here for a minute, and I will link it below as well if you want to have a copy. So these are all the foods that are most toxic to dogs. So check it out. And thanks again to all of my quick thinking viewers who were gracious enough to remind me not to give my dogs onions. Okay, on to the video. Okay, so I was curious about the history of the SNAP program, and just from the Google AI brain, I found out that SNAP began in 1939 as a temporary pilot program during the Great Depression, and it was revived as a pilot in 1961 and made into a permanent federal program with the Food Stamp Act of 1964. The program was officially renamed the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program in 2008, and I didn't realize that it was only in 2008 that it was changed to that name. So in 1939, the program started, and then that ended in 1943 due to improved economic conditions. In 1961 through 1964 was the pilot food stamps program. And in the 18 years between the end of the first program, when World War II ended, and the inception of the next, there were tons of studies and reports and legislative proposals. Then in 1964, President Johnson signed the Food Stamp Act, and that was legislation that made the food stamp program permanent. Through the 60s and the early 1970s, the program expanded. In April 1965, participation topped 500,000, and participation topped 1 million in 1966, 2 million in 1967, 3 million in 1969, et cetera, and rapid increases in participation during this period were primarily due to geographic expansion. 1971 to 1974, there were major legislative changes. The early 1970s were a period of growth in participation, concern about the cost of providing food stamp benefits, and questions about administration. So by the early 70s, the government had realized that people were going to take advantage and that probably many more people needed this program than were able to access it. And so they were trying to work out how best to administrate this program. In 1974, it became a nationwide program, began operating nationwide July 1st of 74 and in Puerto Rico on November 1st of 1974. And my personal experience with food stamps, the only experience that I have, is when my mom was a single mom with me and my two twin brothers. So she had 3 little kids, like basically under the age of 6. And she was a hairdresser and she taught at a hairdressing school. And I remember clearly waiting in line for food stamps. And I remember the feeling of horrible shame and failure that my mother had about having food stamps. And as I've said before on this channel, I grew up in Lawrence, Massachusetts, which is a very depressed industrial city, or at least it was very depressed and broke down, and think like lots of old mills that have been shut down and are empty, and it was that kind of place. And a lot of people, it was one of the places where it became part of the culture to rely on government benefits. And I'm not saying that's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm not giving an opinion on it right now, but that's just where I come from. So I remember standing in line for food stamps and feeling really guilty about it. And that's a horrible thing to feel, because it's no one consumer's fault that everything is so fucking expensive. Like, you shouldn't feel bad. Everybody's got to eat. In 1976, participation hit a new record high of 18.5 million people. And then there was more legislation passed. By 1981, there were 22.4 million people accessing food stamps. There were budget cutbacks in the early 1980s, and that was when Ronald Reagan hit the national political scene. The large and expensive food stamp program came under close scrutiny of both the executive branch and Congress in the early 1980s. Major legislation in 81 and 82 enacted cutbacks, including added a gross income eligibility test in addition to the net income test for most households. And keep in mind, even today, most people who are on food stamps have full-time jobs, sometimes more than one. And that's how fucked up this country is, that people that work 80 hours a week cannot afford to feed their family. Sick. Additional cutbacks included established annual adjustments in the food stamp allotment rather than semi-annual, required periodic reporting and retrospective budgeting, prohibited the use of federal funds for outreach, counted retirement accounts as resources. So imagine that. You could be on food stamps prior to that legislation and have millions in your retirement account and get free groceries. It created a state option to require job search of applicants as well as participants, and it increased disqualification periods for voluntary quitters of their job, I think. So throughout the 80s, there was a recognition of domestic hunger. And we began to realize how many American children were starving in this land of plenty. And so there was another legislation, the Food Stamp Act of 1985, required all states to implement an employment and training program, which is a great idea because nobody really wants to have to ask for help. But if you're going to be on assistance, then the government should also train you so that you can get off of assistance. And unfortunately, from a lot of what we've all seen online recently, there are people who have been raised on assistance for generations and think that it's just perfectly acceptable and it is always going to be there. And that's just not the case. So by the late 1970s, Ronald Reagan was making his presidential runs, and he popularized the expression welfare queen, and it entered the national chat, if you will, around that time. Welfare queen is a derogatory term used in the United States to describe individuals who are perceived to misuse or abuse the welfare system. And this is the Wikipedia definition. The media's coverage of welfare fraud began in the early 1960s and was featured in general interest publications such as Reader's Digest. The term gained widespread recognition following media reporting in 1974 regarding the case of Linda Taylor. And this is the woman who Reagan based his he needed a hot button issue so that his followers and he could hate the same group of other people. And so he came up with I don't know if he came up with the term, but he popularized the term welfare queen. And since its inception, that phrase has remained a stigmatizing label, and it has at times been disproportionately associated with Black single mothers. The stereotype implies that these women intentionally have multiple children to maximize their welfare benefits. And I definitely grew up knowing this stereotype. That was like, we just took that as, real. We accepted that as real. And so entire generations of people were just brainwashed to believe that the welfare system, food stamps, WIC, women, infants, and children, cash assistance, Section 8, all of these things comprise the welfare system. And we were just really brainwashed to believe that this was a huge cultural thing, that all these young women were running around having sex with as many men as they could, usually Black or brown women, of course, in the racist United States of America. And it's still that way today. I've seen a million TikToks. I can't tell if they're satire or if they're real. But because we have this stupid stereotype, people just assume that that is the bulk of who is ripping off their tax dollars. As a result, it has been widely criticized as racist by many observers because it is fucking racist. Besides, many white, Latino, Asian, and Arab Americans are welfare recipients. Yes, because America is the melting pot. We have people from every country in the world come here. And if they need help, they should be able to get it. But in my humble, not an expert on federal programs opinion, number one, when the SNAP program was created, there were no ultra-processed foods. We're talking 1939, food assistance was created. There were no processed foods. Think about that. There was no fast food. And so now in the States, we have this big hoopla because the current administration wants to ban, and in many states has, it's up to each individual state, from my understanding, they want to ban SNAP recipients from buying junk food. Now, that's, there's personal freedom involved in that. But I have to say, I don't think it's a bad idea to steer the culture back to buying more whole foods. I don't know. This whole topic fascinates me from many different perspectives. Because where I was raised and where I grew up, I was absolutely fucking terrified that I was going to end up pregnant and on welfare. Like literally, that was something you could threaten your daughters with where I'm from, oh, you're going to end up in a Section 8 apartment on food stamps and blah, blah, blah with a bunch of kids. And there were many girls my age that's what they did. So it did seem like there was a lot of that going on, but it was obviously the national media that brought this concept that, there's all these women running around taking advantage of the system. And it's really just the smallest fraction of there's always going to be fraud because it's humans are involved, but it's such a tiny, tiny fraction. And so, believe it or not, the term welfare queen actually stems from an actual case, and that's what Ronald Reagan used. He didn't use the term welfare queen in his speeches, but he did tell the story of this woman. And so I will leave this link below. This is from pbs.org, and it's called The True Story Behind the Welfare Queen Stereotype. And it is a new book called The Queen by author Josh Levin. Tells the story of Linda Taylor, a woman who became famous as a welfare cheat. She was a woman who went by many names, was accused of many crimes, and whose image as a Cadillac driving welfare recipient has lived on. And the article says, in part, the stereotype of the so-called welfare queen has been used to demonize those on public assistance for decades. Politicians, including former President Ronald Reagan, have been accused of exploiting this image as a kind of racist dog whistle. Yes. Meanwhile, the original welfare queen that Reagan used as the basis for his caricature was based on a real person, and that is detailed in this book. Her name was Linda Taylor. She was identified by the Chicago Tribune in 1974 as a person who had committed welfare fraud while driving fancy cars, including a Cadillac. And very quickly after that, she was given the nickname the Welfare Queen. And it was a nickname and a stereotype that really very quickly blew up. And so Ronald Reagan started using it because one of his advisors had found that story that was originally from the Chicago Tribune and was looking for outrageous stories about welfare because welfare reform had been one of Reagan's big accomplishments as governor of California. And it was also something that voters were outraged about because the best way to get the 99% to forget about how corporations and entire industries suck up their tax dollars is to get them to pick on people who are poorer than them and hate those people. And so Ronald Reagan's campaign speech in 1976 said, in Chicago, they found a woman who holds the record. She used 80 names, 30 addresses, 15 telephone numbers to collect food stamps, Social Security, veterans benefits, and four non-existent deceased veteran husbands. Her tax-free cash income alone had been running $150,000 a year. So he didn't use the phrase welfare queen, but he would talk about how this woman in Chicago had stolen as much as $150,000 of welfare money in a single year, which was a very exaggerated sum. And obviously, this is back in the 70s. We're talking 50 years ago. So the system has been updated since then. There's a lot less of this going on. But the media really wants to keep that stereotype going with this recent crisis because it's sexy. It gets attention. I mean, it got my attention. I'm fucking sitting here watching TikToks, and I barely go on TikTok, but I'm watching TikToks of one single mom after another freaking out because they're not going to get their food stamps. How is that helping the country? Okay, and so what do we know about who gets food stamps in the U.S.? There's roughly 42 million people currently on food stamps in the United States. That is roughly 1 in 8 Americans. And this is from pewresearch.org. Characteristics of SNAP recipients, and this is from 2023, but it's generally the same. The most comprehensive data source we have is the Census Bureau's Survey of Income and Program Participation. And so it shows the general ages of who is on food stamps, and the biggest group is the 25 to 44. That would, to me, I guess, be moms, families, people who need to feed their families. But here is the best part. 61.1% of food stamp recipients are white in this country. So the whole Black welfare queen or Hispanic welfare queen is bullshit. And if you need to have help to buy food, For yourself, if you're single, or for your family, or for you and your children, it doesn't matter. You should not have to feel bad about it. If you really need it, you should be able to get help. This is the richest fucking country in the history of the known universe. We should be able to feed everyone, no problem. Okay, let's get off of that soapbox right away. So, the past couple of months in the US, everybody has been very, very concerned about all of these people defrauding the welfare system. So, I just wanted to look up and see possibly what the data says about that. And according to the Google AI brain, the percentage of welfare recipients who abuse the system is a small fraction, though the exact number is hard to pinpoint because different programs and types of abuse are measured differently. For instance, improper payments in the SNAP program are estimated to be around 11.7% of benefits paid, which includes errors and fraud, while actual fraud like trafficking or selling your food stamps, which lots of people do, has been reduced to about 1%. And studies on the SNAP program indicates that less than 1% of benefits go to ineligible households, and the majority of improper payments are due to administrative or recipient errors and not intentional fraud. Some key statistics on welfare abuse. With regard to the SNAP program, an estimated 1% of SNAP benefits were trafficked or illegally sold between 2012 and 2014, a figure the USDA has worked to reduce to its current level. So the fact that we have more media in our lives now than ever before, all this social media, TikTok, there was tons of people on TikTok making satirical welfare videos, and you can't tell the difference between someone who's serious and someone who's snarking, and that is really terrifying. If we can't tell reality, we're all getting all up in arms over things that we don't even know if it's real. For every 10,000 SNAP households, approximately 14 contained a recipient who was investigated and found to have committed fraud, according to a 2018 report by the Congressional Research Service. Other welfare programs, research on programs like Medicaid has shown that the majority of fraud is committed by healthcare providers, not by the low-income individuals using the program. So while everybody is pissed off about single moms with multiple baby daddies having kid after kid so they can get a bigger welfare check and more food stamps, what's really sucking up your tax money is the approximately $181 billion in corporate welfare. And corporate welfare is no new phenomenon. Back in 1773, the Boston Tea Party wasn't just about taxes on tea. It was also outrage over the special monopoly privileges handed to the British East India Company. And those perks were essentially an early bailout designed to pull the company out of debt at the colonists' expense. So the powers tax the people and give the money to corporations so that they can get out of the business trouble that they got themselves into, basically. It's just shameful. Meanwhile, they get us to worry about our neighbors who get a few $100 in food stamps a month. And who cares? Even if they get thousands of dollars in food stamps, that's nothing compared to the free ride that the likes of this guy has gotten. So yeah, Mr. Muskie. He is basically the face of business, being that he is the world's richest person. And he is an immigrant to the United States. Let's remember that. And so Elon didn't get to be the richest man on earth by himself. His business empire, according to goodjobsfirst.org, is built on $38 billion in government funding. Government infusions at key moments helped Tesla and SpaceX flourish, boosting Musk's wealth. And his wealth has considerably gone up since he has cut so much out of the federal budget to fund tax breaks for himself and all of his rich buddies. And that's all paid for by the American taxpayers. And yet, we're all concerned about Shaniqua down the street, who we don't know, but we assume she's there with her many baby daddies and her many children, and she's really living off the backs of the taxpayers. Come on, people. It's not about us. It's not about the poorest among us. If some woman grows up thinking that her life, the best choice for her life is to have baby after baby after baby so she can get a bigger welfare check, then feel sorry for her. Don't be mad at her. If that's what you think the best you can do is, you have been done wrong by your entire family. So don't be mad at each other. Let's be mad at the real culprits, the fucking 1%. We just worship capitalism in this country, in my humble opinion, so much that we think that if you're the richest guy on earth, you must be smart. You must know what you're doing. You must be a great guy because look how blessed you are. No. So according to goodjobsfirst.org, they go on and say, over the years, Musk and his businesses have received at least $38 billion in government contracts, loans, subsidies, and tax credits, often at critical moments, a Washington Post analysis has found, helping seed the growth that has made him the world's richest person. Nearly a tenth of government money that has benefited Musk's companies comes from agencies in 8 states, including California. Since 2007, state and local governments have given Musk's companies at least $1.5 billion in tax credits, grants, and reimbursements, while various other agencies at multiple levels contributed another $2.1 billion, much of it to drive the development of Tesla and the batteries it relies upon, according to the data from the advocacy group Good Jobs First. The $38 billion Musk's companies have received are surely an undercount, the story notes. So here are some further examples of corporate welfare funded by your tax dollars. In 1997, the Forest Service spent $140 million building roads in national forests, thus subsidizing the removal of timber from federal lands by multi-million-dollar timber companies. Over the past 20 years, the Forest Service has built 340,000 miles of roads, more than 8 times the length of the interstate highway system, primarily for the benefit of logging companies. That's federal land owned by the American people. And the American government is pouring money into logging companies, your tax dollars. So if you hadn't figured it out by now, business subsidies from the federal government, those are the real welfare cheats. That is where most of your tax money is going, to welfare for corporations. And one of the ways we can possibly do something about that is to end the legislation commonly known as Citizens United. There's a link below. Please check it out. That gives corporations the right to lavish money and gifts and everything else on any politician they want. Okay, so this is also from an article on hoover.org. It's called Welfare for the Well-Off: How Business Subsidies Fleece Taxpayers. And one of the most inefficient and unwarranted tax subsidies is provided to the industry that produces ethanol, a corn-based gasoline substitute. Ethanol enjoys 2 tax breaks: a tax credit for companies that blend ethanol and an exemption from federal excise taxes. The tax breaks are allegedly justified on the grounds that they reduce pollution and U.S. dependence on foreign oil. The U.S. is the largest oil-producing country in the world, by the way. But a USDA study finds that the $500 million subsidy for ethanol represents an inefficient use of our nation's resources. It concludes, when all economic costs and benefits are tallied, an ethanol subsidy program is not cost effective. And finally, from visualcapitalist.com, this is a graphic for the companies benefiting the most from U.S. taxpayer support. So look at that. Boeing, who makes airplanes, $15.5 billion. There's also state incentives for Boeing in Washington state, totaling $13 billion. and that supports their assembly plant. All of these companies, multi-gazillion dollar corporations. Amazon, almost 6 billion of our tax dollars goes to Amazon. For what? For what? What does Amazon need money for? What does Amazon need your tax money for? Amazon needs your tax dollars a hell of a lot less than the lady down the street with 6 kids needs your tax dollars. She has kids to feed. A couple $100 is not going to kill the US taxpayer to keep everybody fed. Why do we have to debate this in the 21st century? Tesla down here, almost $3 billion from the federal government. Walt Disney. What, Disney Corporation isn't rich enough? They get $2.6 billion of our tax money? Come on, wake up, people. And that's what I have for you today, guys. I hope this mishmash of information makes some kind of sense. I wanted to put something together just to put my 2 cents in, that people need to realize that the amount of money that is stolen from taxpayers by women having multiple children by multiple different men, so they can get more food stamps, is nothing, a drop in the bucket compared to what corporations are doing with your tax money. So please realize who the real welfare queens are. And if you like this video, please like it. I would love it if you would subscribe to the channel. I thank everybody that stops by to hear me talk shit on the internet, and I will see you guys in the next video. And thank you so much.